Hello, and welcome to another episode of the FemiNinja Project. And thank you so much for tuning in. As always, I have a spectacular guest with me today. Very, very fascinating. His name is Dr. Bruce Chalmer. He is a psychologist, author, couples therapist, and podcast host with over 30 years of working with couples. Through his teaching, consulting, writing, podcast episodes, and videos about relationships, his ideas have helped thousands of couples as well as other therapists. He is the author of 3 books, co hosts the Couples Therapy in 7 Words podcast with his wife, educator Judy Alexander. Dr. Chalmer also has a strong interest in musical composition, choral singing, and directing. Bruce, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Cheryl. I'm delighted to be on the show, and thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's an honor to have you on the show. And I guess there was so many things about your bio that really kind of piqued my interest. But the thing that really captivated my attention was couples therapy in 7 words.
Yep.
It almost sounds like, I don't know, an oxymoron or whatever. But you have been working with people, obviously, for over 30 years. How did you come up with these 7 words? Because
Yeah.
everybody thinks that it's got to be so complicated.
Well, of course. And look, as you mentioned, I've written books, and clearly I am not able to explain it all in 7 words, and we wouldn't be doing these podcasts like that. Oh, I'll just give you the 7 words and everything is fine. I will tell you the origin story, which I have a lot of fun telling. Mentioned 30 years and 30 years, a little over 30 years in private practice, and a few years before that, doing internships. And maybe 3, 4 years, 2, 3 years, whatever, early in my private practice, I
Mhm.
was at a consultation group meeting. And we were sitting around, I don't even remember what we were talking about. We must have been talking about couples therapy, I imagine, because as we were getting up to leave, one of my colleagues, who was a friend of mine, turned to me and said, "How do you do couples therapy anyway?" It's sort of this funny question.
Mhm.
Clearly, he wasn't expecting much in the way of an answer, and I didn't immediately have one. But I actually had been giving it some thought. All the trainings I got and all the experiences I had up to that point, I was still pretty early in my career. But I was realizing essentially what I'm trying to tell people or convey to people is be kind and don't panic. And be
Mhm.
kind, I don't just mean be nice. Yes, we should all be nice, but I mean be kin. Recognize your kinship with this other person because that's what keeps people wanting to be in a couple is that sense of kinship. And you can't do that if you're in a panic. And the techniques I had been trained in and that most of us have learned are techniques about helping people not panic, even when they're dealing with something difficult. So be kind and don't panic. Well, that's only 5 words. So what happened? So I started sharing that. My colleague said, "Well, that's sort of interesting. It's an interesting way of, thinking about it." I started sharing that with some of the couples I worked with. And people would tell me, "Hey, that is kind of interesting," because I'd explain, you can't be kind if you're in a panic. That's the whole idea there. And they'd say, "Yeah, I get that. Tell me, how do you not panic?" And they had me there because
Mm.
that's not so simple. I don't have a simple formula for how do you not panic. I could just say, "Well, then don't panic."
Mhm.
But what I did notice as I thought about the folks I'd been working with, loosely speaking, there were the people who came in and did pretty well, and the people who came in and didn't do so well. And by didn't do so well, I just mean they had a hard time getting unstuck. Now, you could
Mhm.
attribute a fair amount of that to my relative lack of experience or expertise. Who knows? I'm sure I'm part of that.
Mhm.
But what I noted, well, I mean, and over time, I've learned a lot, but I'm still quite capable of not being all that much help. I mean, I certainly try.
Mhm.
But aside from that, I noted if you sort of, lump together the folks who did well and the folks who didn't, it seemed like the ones who did well were manifesting this particular mindset. I wasn't quite sure what to call it. I ended up calling it faith. And I realize using the word faith is a little risky because it sounds like I'm faith-based, therapy, which that term doesn't apply to what I do very well. That usually, first of all, usually is Christian. I'm Jewish. I mean, there are Jewish folks who would do what they would call faith-based therapy as well, but I'm not talking about that kind. It's not necessarily religious faith. It's certainly not any particular set of dogma or any particular set of even a particular religion.
Mhm.
What I mean by faith is a mindset that says, even when it's painful, reality is somehow right to be what it is. There's some rightness about it.
Mhm.
It's a basic orientation to the world. And the folks that would come in with that, they would be the ones that could heal. Again, together or separate, but they would heal. And what I mean by healing, they would, and I can give a comparison. It's funny, the book I'm working on right now, I was just writing about this. I suppose that's why this particular comparison pops in my mind. So if you think about a couple that would come in, let's say there's a couple that is dealing with infidelity, which is a pretty substantial portion of the population I work with. I don't know, probably less than half, but not much less than half of the couples
Wow.
I see are coming in with infidelity. It's a very, very common issue. And so, or, betrayals of one kind or another, but especially
Mhm.
infidelity. So couple has come in, let's say the woman has just found out that the man had a one night stand and
Mhm.
he's guilty, feels terrible. She's angry, she's hurt, she's, all of the above, all of those things are happening. And they come in and what they say is, we just want to make sure we want to go back to how it was. It was fine until he did this stupid thing,
Mhm.
and we need to go back to how it was. And he's feeling like I just wanted to believe that I'll never do it again. I must have just been crazy momentarily. And she's saying, "You darn right, you're never going to do it again. And I'm going to monitor you and I'm going to make sure you don't do it. And the purpose of this therapy is we're going to set up rules to protect us and make sure this will never happen again." And perhaps I'm being a little overdramatic there. I don't know. I mean, I've heard folks that are sort of like that. And compare them with another couple that comes in, similar situation. She's just found out that he had a one night stand on a business trip, and she's saying, "This is incredibly painful." And he's saying, "Yeah, he so feels terrible."
Mhm.
And she's saying, "But the thing is, I know he's not crazy. I know he's not evil. I love him, and I even think I believe him when he says he loves me. We're going to have to understand this." And that's painful because maybe there's something in the relationship that doesn't condone it. That doesn't
Mhm.
mean, he's still responsible for his own actions.
Mhm.
But maybe we're both part of this somehow. We need to look at it. That's an attitude of faith. That's what I mean by faith.
That reaction to me is an incredible generosity of spirit
Yes. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
trust. So that goes back to what you're talking about faith.
Hmm. Yes, it is. It is very much generosity of spirit. And I think what facilitates that is that concept that says, it's the first thing I sort of quoted this imaginary person as saying,
Mm-hmm.
is that, well, I know he's not crazy and I know he's not evil, and he's not stupid and neither am I,
Mm-hmm.
and that is something that with almost every couple that I work with, it's usually just turns out to be about 20 minutes into the first session because I have stuff, some preliminary stuff I do, and I usually do a family diagram and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But about 20 minutes in, I will usually note to the couple, I will say, well, and it's when I'm telling them about this concept that I always like to structure the first session around the concepts of stability and intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm claiming they're both needs.
Mm-hmm.
And yet the skill set you need for stability is very different from the skill set you need for intimacy. And when I'm talking about stability, I will say, well, look, now that we're old buddies because I've known you for 20 minutes, I can already tell something about the two of you. I'm pretty sure neither one of you is batshit crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And they will usually look at me and smile, and I will note, I trust you did not need me to tell you that,
Mm-hmm.
you were pretty sure of that coming in. But they will often note, yeah, they didn't need me to tell them that, but that's reassuring anyway. That's a statement of faith.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not an empty statement because in the 30 years of doing this, there have been a handful maybe of couples where I haven't said that because somebody's having a serious mental health problem. Somebody's
Mm-hmm.
having a psychotic break or somebody's having a manic episode or something like that. In
Mm-hmm.
that case, well, yeah, they are batshit crazy. And
Mm-hmm.
that's going to make stability incredibly difficult. You really can't count on someone to know the same reality you know, and that's very difficult. But the vast, vast majority of folks I'm working with, they're not nuts. And they're not evil either, and they don't think each other is evil, which is, one of my little pet peeves on the internet these days. And I don't know if your listeners, I probably more are hearing us than seeing us, right? They can't
As
tell that
both.
I'm an old dude. Well, the fact that 30 years of private practice, you might think I must be like in my 50s or 60s. I'm actually in my mid 70s. I'm 74. So I'm an old
Yay.
guy. So I get to talk like an old guy.
So you
So
can't say that because my husband's 74. He'll be 75 in a few weeks.
Well, I think it's then he's an old guy too, but it's good to be an old guy. So that's there's nothing bad about it. But anyway,
Yeah.
my point being what I'm about to say sounds like an old guy thing to say, but back in the day, that sort of statement.
Mhm.
Um, well, where was I going with that? The with respect to the idea of stability, where was I going with that?
Yeah,
See, that's an
stability.
old guy thing to do as well. Yeah, stability and intimacy. With respect to the notion of stability, the idea that they're not crazy is a very reassuring thing to
Hmm.
say. And that phenomenon that it is a rare thing that, it's a rare thing that people are crazy coming in and they know that about each other, and that is a attitude of faith. So
Hmm.
when I start with that, I start by reassuring them, well, as far as I can tell, this is not a mental health problem per se.
Hmm.
This is not pathological. There's no illness about this. It's amazing that people who are in fact fundamentally decent and fundamentally not crazy
Hmm.
and fundamentally, not cognitively impaired can end up in situations where they make bad choices or
Hmm.
are hurt badly.
Hmm.
And that is sort of the human condition. So we better work with it. All of that, that's what I mean by faith.
Hmm.
So that ends up in 7 words. If we get back to the original 7 words, be kind, don't panic, and
Oh,
have faith. Which
I love
yes,
that.
we have merch for our podcast. Nobody
Hmm.
buys it, but we have merch. It's very easy to get this stuff, by the way. It doesn't cost anything to, I forgot what the company is that makes these things. It's really cute.
Hmm. Oh,
That's our
yes.
logo for our podcast,
And I
Couples Therapy
love
in seven
that
words.
logo. So,
Yeah,
okay,
but
if you're
Judy, my
for
wife, designed that one.
That's awesome. So, for the
Yeah.
listeners who are just listening to the audio, please do go to the YouTube and check it out because it is a great logo. You will also see it if you're watching and looking on my website because I will have that posted there too. So, it's a great logo.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad you like it. Yeah, we like it. So, the whole notion of couples therapy in 7 words,
Mm-hmm.
I think that sort of, it doesn't exactly tell you how to implement all that, but
Mm-hmm.
there is a logic to it. So that if you are able to develop this mindset of faith, that's how you can not panic. That's how you can tolerate the anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
which is what intimacy requires. I talked about stability and intimacy. The chief skills of stability are all about avoiding anxiety, which of course,
Mm-hmm.
anxiety is designed by evolution to suck. It feels bad.
Right?
It's meant to. It's like, do something different. You're in danger. Something's wrong. But the chief skill of intimacy isn't to avoid anxiety, it's to tolerate it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really where faith comes in.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you have that recognition that, like, okay, it's like I was quoting that imaginary woman whose husband had cheated on her as a saying, we're going to have to look at this. We're going to have to accept the reality of what happened and take it as meaningful, even if it's
Mm-hmm.
painful. That's an attitude of faith. That's
Mm-hmm.
what lets you tolerate them, because that's what that is inviting is actual intimate conversation. Intimacy, just in the simple sense of being present and honest with yourself and each other.
Mm-hmm.
And we crave that. We need that as much as we need stability. We need both. I'm not knocking
Mm-hmm.
stability either, but we crave that. And the skills sometimes are a bit in tension because the skills of stability are about being predictable and reliable and
Mm-hmm.
responsible and all kinds of good and very boring attributes. They're good, but they're
Mm-hmm.
boring. The skills of intimacy are about often being sort of unpredictable and surprising yourself and surprising your partner. And you never know where that's going to go. And that's a little scary, but it could be really exciting. That's not at all stable, but
Mm-hmm.
it's exciting. And we need both of those things.
What I like about the 7 words is that I mean, it seems so simplistic and it takes something that could be overwhelming or scary or something I just don't want to deal with this right now and put it into like a package that, okay, this might be a little bit more doable than I thought it was at first. But on the other side, I wonder if when some people hear that, do they think, oh no, you can't possibly help me with 7 words?
Probably. I think I would say that myself. It's like, yeah, if I said, all you have to know is these 7 words, go away. Have you seen the Bob Newhart sketch, the Stop It sketch? I've sort of given away the punchline there. Well, you remember Bob Newhart just died not that long ago,
Oh,
within the
he
past
did.
few
I
months.
didn't realize that. I love
Yes, he
Bob
was,
Newhart and the
yeah,
Newhart
he was
Show.
very old.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
the Bob
Yeah.
Newhart show, remember in the 70s, it was the one where he was a psychologist. The one
Right.
in the, what was it, the
With
80s, I guess, was
Suzanne
the one was,
Plachette.
yes, was Suzanne Plachette, exactly. And they showed up in the finale of his later show. It was brilliant,
Yes,
yeah.
that was
But
brilliant.
yeah, so he was a psychologist in the early, and it was, I mean, to watch it as a psychologist, it's hilarious because he's violating so many principles, and
Uh-huh.
but it's very funny in doing it. But and I think he may have done this bit a little bit on the show, but he had a separate comedy sketch where he would do this. He would be a psychologist. Somebody would come in, and they would say, before they ever start talking, he would say, it's he would quote his fee. He would say something like, "It's $10 for 10 minutes, but it's very unlikely you'll need more than 5 minutes." And somebody would say, "Really?" And so he would say, "Well, what's bothering you?" And so someone would start to say, "Well, I find that, I often find myself, washing my hands too much." And he'll say, "Stop it." And Papa Newt would just say, "Stop it." And then the person would go on and say, "But you see, it happens when, stop it." He would just sort of go, "Stop it." Anyway, that's two words.
Mhm.
That which is hilarious. That, let's just say, is probably not always terribly effective with real people.
Yeah, I can
Um,
understand that. Hmm.
yeah, and so picking up on what you're asking, for me to say 7 words and that solves all your problems, yeah, that's like saying stop it. It's like, oh, okay, probably not. But I will say, occasionally people have told me they put it on their refrigerator. They'll put the words on the refrigerator just to remind them.
Right.
And I like the concept of it because it's just a way of structuring some ideas to help, like you sort of implied that, to help you
Hmm.
remember it. It simplifies it. Of course, it way oversimplifies it,
Hmm.
but it gives you a sense of, gee, maybe this is doable. And that's certainly part of faith as well. This whole living business, it must be doable even when it's painful.
Hmm. I would
And
like to suggest too, I mean, I love the idea about putting it on the refrigerator door because you see it all the time. But I would also suggest, since you have this wonderful merch and that wonderful coffee cup, that maybe the listeners might want to go to the store and buy that too.
Well, I appreciate the plug. We not only have it, we have, yes, the two coffee mugs. We have it on t-shirts, and we have it on. Oh, I have it. I don't have my tote bag handy. We have it on a really nice tote bag as well, where on one side it has the logo, and the other side it has the words, "Be kind, don't panic, and have faith." Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm carrying that tote bag around all the time, and people will ask about it. So,
right. And with the tote bag, they could always put your books in it. So you have three so far and one on the way. So it'd be a great way to carry your books around. See,
wow,
I'm good,
this
huh?
you're great yeah. I really appreciate the promo there.
I am so much better at promoting other people than I am myself. It's just like, ah.
I see your books in the background. Everybody should buy those too. Yeah.
Oh, why, thank you. Yes, I've got two so far. I've got two more that are I'm working on, but it's slow progress since all of this moving stuff is taking a lot of my energy and my brain power.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So, so what do you do if somebody comes up to you and says, "You can't possibly help me with 7 words"?
Oh, I would say, well, of course not. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, I can't possibly help you with 7 words. It's just a handy,
Hmm.
sometimes I will say to folks in sessions, um, I'll have my particular shticks that I do, like a bad Borscht Belt comic, my little shticks. I have my shtick about my 7 words. I have my shtick about, I'll tell you another of my shticks briefly. And it's funny, my wife and I did this, Judy Alexander and I did this on our podcast a few months ago. You can relate to this probably. You have guests, we have guests,
Uh-huh.
we were all set to record and the guests didn't show. And it turned out they had a very good excuse. I mean, not
Hmm.
that they needed, you know what I'm saying? They
Right.
they had
I
a family
understand.
emergency. It was
Yeah.
well, we didn't know it at the time. So we're sitting there waiting and realizing, well, they're not going to come. But we still were ready to record. We wanted to do one that week. We usually like to release an episode every week.
Hmm.
So I said to Judy, "Oh, I know. Let's do a podcast on the one skill that solves all relationship problems." Not too grandiose, right? Just a
No,
tad
no.
grandiose. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she looked at me as if to say, "Oh, really?" But she was, she's a good sport. She went along.
Hmm.
She knows I'm full of baloney, and she's very good at bringing me when I nerd out. She's very good at bringing me back down. That's why we do well on the podcast together.
Hmm.
So anyway, she said, "Okay, what?" And I said, "Well, so we did the podcast. The one skill that solves all relationship problems is the ability to be moderately annoyed. That is the skill, as opposed to freaking out."
Right.
And I'm claiming that solves all relationship problems. That'll give us world peace. It's not just, couples.
Right.
The ability to be moderately annoyed. Now, is that silly? Yes. Is there a grain of truth in it? Well, I claim there is, because that ability, you know, the one thing you know for sure, and I say this to couples, it's another one of my little shticks that I say in accordance with this. The one thing I knew about the two of you before I met you, and I certainly know about myself, is that we're all annoying. You know, God knows we're all annoying. We are all, people are annoying. We're annoying. We're not only annoying. And I always do like to point out, that skill of being able to be moderately annoyed without freaking out. My wife is far better at it than I am because I'm way more annoying. So she has a lot more practice at it and she's really good at it. So that's why we get along well, because she's really nice about me being annoying. And I try, I don't take that as carte blanche to be annoying. I do try to adjust when she lets me know that I'm being annoying. But nevertheless, that skill is a necessary skill. Now, what's the serious undercurrent of that? It's that indeed nobody's playing their A game all the time with respect to their
Mhm.
partner. And occasionally people are going to be annoying or even maybe worse than annoying. They're going to not understand or be a little selfish or be a little inconsiderate
Mhm.
or whatever those things are, all those human condition things.
Mhm.
And indeed, it can be too much so that you end up saying, well, I can't be with that person. It's just too much. But the ability, there is no human being who won't be annoying sometimes, somehow.
Mhm.
What's his name? Alain de Botton. I'm not sure if he pronounces it the French way or the more like an English way, Alain de Botton or something like that. He's
Okay.
an author, and I forgot he's known for something else better. I forgot what it is. Somebody else pointed it out to me. But one of the things he wrote is a book a few years ago. And I didn't read a book. I didn't read the book, but I read an article he wrote that was abstracted from the book called "Why You Will Marry the Wrong Person." And he's not cynical at all
Mhm.
about marriage. He's just observing that if you think the person you will get together with will never annoy you, that's more my language than his, but that's basically what he's saying.
Right.
It isn't going to be true. Anybody you marry or couple up with is going to come with a particular set of annoyances.
Mhm.
And if you trade them in for someone else, you'll just get a different set of annoyances. And guess
Mhm.
what? You bring them too. We
Mhm.
all bring them. And that's a handy thing to know.
Mhm.
And that really fits with that concept of being able to, first of all, being able to be kind, because it means, and that's another one that people will often, it's another one of my shticks, as they say, people will often say, wow, that was really handy to know. They laugh at it because it's funny,
Mhm.
but they also recognize the truth in it. It's like, yeah, I don't have to act as if I've been mortally offended when my partner was just a little bit less than perfect.
Mhm.
And when people recognize that, they can relax. And again, I don't mean to trivialize things that are not just annoyances. There are things that rise to the level of deal breakers that can happen, but it does tend to put things in perspective.
One of the things I love the most about it, to be moderately annoying or moderately annoyed, the phrase just keeps popping into my head, everything in moderation.
Hmm. Absolutely. It's a great
Because
example of that,
you're
isn't it?
going to get it.
Yeah. Yeah. And if somebody, I can't even imagine this, but if somebody was never annoying,
Oh, that would be
I can't
annoying in
even, I mean, what
itself.
is that? A
Ooh,
Stepford wife or something?
yeah.
Is that the term? I mean,
I don't know.
it's
That
like,
just that sounds even more annoying than an annoying
yeah,
person.
that would be annoying.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like somebody who's like perfect in every way.
Yeah. Well,
That
have you ever
perfection
met
itself.
anybody or worked with somebody who was always so sweet and so upbeat that you just want to slap them? I mean, it's
Oh
just
yeah,
like,
yeah.
yeah, that's just so irritating.
I've
It's
I've met
annoying.
folks. This isn't exactly the same as that, but it's similar. I've met folks where they are so concerned about never hurting anyone's feelings
Ah.
that when the inevitable happens where they it's an oversight or something, then all of a sudden it's all about how horrible they feel as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
them just saying, "Oh wow, I'm sorry I forgot to bring the thing I was supposed to bring to the meeting."
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's annoying, but whatever. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we've all screwed up. As opposed to, oh my God, I can't believe I did that, and I'm not, and going on. I mean, it becomes obnoxious, and so
Right.
that can be difficult.
Well, I grew up with four sisters. So, we became very good at going, with the flow and the punches and stuff and the annoyances and all of that stuff. And as far as hurting feelings, it's like, well, it's going to happen. So here you go.
That sounds like really, really good training,
Yeah. Well,
training
Eastern
for life.
European too, so.
Uh,
Mm, mhm. So what made you decide to go into psychology from the very beginning? I mean, what was it that, you know, brought you or really piqued your interest about the field?
yeah. Well, psychology in general, I got into kind of around a different route. I was a
Hmm.
statistician. I had a master's degree in statistics at the University of Vermont. I was
Wow.
actually teaching statistics and working in the medical school as a statistician. And I wanted to get a PhD, and they didn't have a PhD program in statistics there at that time at the University of Vermont. They
Hmm.
had but the psychology department, I actually had worked with them on my master's degree.
Hmm.
And they said, well, why don't you come get a PhD with us on the research side? Because we'll take all of your courses. Those would be courses we would either require or certainly give you credit for. So that's what I did. I got my PhD in psychology on the research side of things more than on the clinical side.
Wow.
I didn't get clinical training until later. And why did I do that? Well, but Judy and I are a second marriage. We're each in a second marriage.
Hmm.
And when my first marriage ran into serious crisis, that's what introduced me to therapy.
Mm.
And I found that incredibly powerful. It was interesting. I found it powerful even with a therapist that I later decided was really pretty awful. I mean, in terms of they were doing some things that I later said, "Oh my God, nobody should do that." I mean, it wasn't that blatant, but
Right,
whatever.
but I understand.
But it
Yeah.
was still so powerful. And then
Yeah.
I also worked with some folks who were really very helpful.
Hmm.
And I can tell you the short story of my first marriage because I think it's sort of relevant. Both my ex and I have gone on to marry really wonderful women, and we're both a lot happier. That's the
Ah,
the short
okay.
story of my
There
first
you
marriage.
go.
Worked out a lot better that way. She's happier, I'm happier. We all like each other. It's great.
Hmm.
So that works on fine. But it was painful. I'm
Hmm.
saying that
I'm
as if it
sure.
was easy, and
Yeah.
it wasn't at all easy. And we were married a very long time. It took her quite a while to figure out that really she needed to be married
Wow.
to a woman. So and Judy and I have been married now for 21 years, so we've been together quite a while as well. But I got married, my first marriage, I got married very young.
Hmm.
So that process of going through therapy myself, it felt like something of a calling.
Hmm.
I mentioned I was working as a statistician, I was teaching statistics, I was doing some other stuff, sort of technical type stuff, teaching courses. And that was fun. I was good at it or good enough at it. But when I got involved in clinical type stuff,
Hmm.
as first of all as a client myself, that felt like, wow, I really want to do this.
Hmm.
And because I had a PhD in psychology, it was relatively straightforward to get the additional training I needed to then move over to the clinical side. So I got licensed as a clinical. I was already, how old was I? 44 when I got licensed as a clinical psychologist. It wasn't early in my career.
Hmm.
But as I say, I'm 74 now, so that's why I say I've been licensed for over 30 years.
Hmm.
So that got me into it. And then the more I did it, I started off working with individuals, families, couples, sort of a mix. I got
Hmm.
some training in all of those things. Um, did a little bit of work with kids, but just wasn't as much fun. I mean, I love kids, but it wasn't as much fun to do that. I wanted to work with their parents who where the power was.
Hmm.
That seemed like it made more of a difference. But I started really more and more loving working with couples because there was something about it that was the stakes were high. They
Hmm.
and the I just found it inspiring to watch people, I suppose, probably, relating to some of my own experiences I had had before. It's so inspiring to watch people struggle with really painful stuff and
Hmm.
find ways of healing.
Hmm.
And to be part of that process is a great privilege.
Hmm.
So that's how I got more and more into working with couples in the last, well, certainly the last 10 or 15 years, it's been mostly couples. And the last 5 or 6, I haven't accepted anybody except couples as new clients. So it's almost all couples now. So
So you still are seeing clients and working with clients?
I am all by telehealth since the pandemic.
Well, yeah,
Um,
that's one of the few blessings that came out of the pandemic is that oh, hey, we don't always have to drive to an office or that we
yeah,
can connect, online. So,
yeah, exactly. And it's, we're a few months into it. The office the group that I was a part of
hmm.
closed down. But I said to Judy a few weeks or a couple months into it, I said, wow, I'm really liking this. Not not liking the
Like,
pandemic,
right.
but I'm really liking this telehealth thing. And of course it's easier for the folks that I see of seeing a couple and they can be in, each at their own workplace or something. It's just so much easier to schedule, so much less time for them. And
Mm-hmm.
it seems to work just as well.
Mm-hmm.
Once I get to know folks, there were people early on who had some misgivings or saying like, how's that going to be, looking at a screen? But as we got used to it, it seemed like it was fine, at least in terms of how I work. So I haven't looked back.
So when did you and Judy start the podcast? I'm just curious about
Well,
that.
that was related to the pandemic as well,
Pandemic. Yep.
because you mentioned I have three books out. The first book I wrote, which is called Reigniting the Spark, that first book, by the way, is oriented around the 7 words. I was going to call it Couples Therapy in 7 Words, but my publisher said, nope, nope, no, no, that's not a good title. And he came up
Yeah.
with a better title. And
Yeah.
I
That's
think he
right.
was right, probably.
Yeah.
And because people would know what the heck is that supposed to mean?
Right.
Why would you buy a book called Couples Therapy in 7 Words?
Yeah.
What is it, 7 words?
It's
But
a very,
anyway,
very short book.
very short book, yeah. But anyway, that one's called Reigniting the Spark. And so we were going to do a book release event.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the release date of the book was February 29th, 2020. Leap day. That's a cool day to release a book, right? February 29th, 2020. Well, guess what happened, as you may recall.
Mm-hmm.
And right around then, everything shut down.
Mm-hmm.
So there we were, and we decided, well, all right, I figured I would try out Facebook Live because I'd never tried that before. And I
Mm-hmm.
asked Judy to be part of it because she's wonderful people should go to our podcast. They will see she's got this incredible voice and presence about her, and I really just enjoy that. And she was really a good, she's been such in a lot of ways, I would say, a good sport about this. She will point out, look, this is a couples therapy podcast. I'm the couples therapist. She's a retired educator.
Uh-huh.
She knows a lot about working with folks, but not from a couples therapy perspective.
Right.
So, she recognizes the role she takes is sort of like bringing me back to, hey, try saying that in English as opposed to nerdese, which I'm apt to do. So anyway, I asked her to be part of the book launch, and she did. So we did that, and people said, "Oh, you guys should do a podcast." And as you realize, I mean, as probably most of your listeners realize, the barrier to entry is pretty low
Mm-hmm.
to do a podcast. You don't need super fancy equipment. And so we started it back then, over 5 years ago now, and
Wow.
we continue to do it ever since. So we've had up to I think it's 218 episodes so far, 218, 219, something like that.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
once you get going, it's almost like an addiction
Hmm.
because yeah, yeah, it's really it's so hard to describe. I fell into podcasting. I didn't even know what a podcast was or why I would ever want one or I mean it was just a really strange situation like a lot of other things in my life. I just kind of fell into it and I figured, well, okay, I'll try it out and I'll do it for a little while and your episode I think number 407. So it's just like
Wow.
yeah, it's just such a I don't want to say compulsive, but it's so rewarding and satisfying and you get to talk to people all over the world all
Hmm.
over the country with so many diverse different backgrounds and it's just so fascinating and
Yeah, that is,
I
it's,
honestly yeah I believe that through podcasting we could make the world a better place through that and your 7 words and the let's see be moderately annoyed
yes,
we could
indeed.
save the
Well,
world.
that I agree with you. I mean, that as you said, we get to talk with people all over the place, and we learn so much.
Oh, so much.
And someone asked, was it? I forgot if we were both being interviewed or if it was just me being interviewed. Often it's just me because I'm talking about my books and stuff like that. But somebody asked that, like, what have you learned from your podcast that's affected your relationship? And we've talked about we've thought of stuff we never would have thought of. We've have stuff to talk about we never would have talked about, just in our lives with each other. We've expanded our horizons in lots of different ways through doing this. So it's a lovely thing to do.
Well, and I want to add one more little piece to that. It also helps keep you young.
I think so. Yeah.
Brain health, neuroplasticity, challenges, new motor pathways. It's another way of just working on your cognitive, abilities, critical
Yeah.
thinking skills, communication skills. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
technological skills, which were really, oh, mine were so pathetic, but I'm much better now than what I was.
Well, that's doing all those episodes, you know. I mean, doing, learning new stuff. That's what they,
Yeah,
a lot of the researchers say about, preventing, cognitive
dementia,
decline.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's all about learning new, exposing yourself. Yeah, creating new neural pathways. So
Okay. Well,
certainly
talking
podcasting helps
about,
with that.
since you mentioned exposing yourself and
Mm.
creating new neural pathways and challenges in life, what made you decide to write that first book and what was the experience like? And obviously, it must have gone fairly well since you're working on number four.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I mean, the working on number four is sort of testimony to the fact that it was fun. It was just fun to do. Um, yeah, what led to the first book, it was fairly straightforward. It really, I'd have to rewind maybe about 10, 12 years, something like that now, maybe even more. I started doing some videos,
Mm-hmm.
YouTube, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
started doing some YouTube videos on various and sundry topics related to my work.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a whole bunch of those. And I think right around a year or so before that book came out, like when I started writing it, I was realizing I think I've got about a book's worth of material here. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't just throw together the scripts of those, I wrote one. I
Mm-hmm.
wove them together, but I had a bunch of topics that I thought I could weave together and structure according to the seven words, the three principles of the seven words, be kind, don't panic, and have faith. And that's how I ended up writing that first book. It just seemed like fun. And then, published it. And it's not like I'm not making my living selling books, I'll tell you, at least not yet. Let's put it that way. But
Mm-hmm.
it was just a lot of fun. Writing it is a lot more fun than trying to promote it. I
Yes.
finally, it's the one thing I've learned over these 5 years since I wrote that, since the first one came out, as I've done successive books, I've focused more and more on what's fun and worried less and less about, what I'm supposed to do to sell them.
Mm-hmm.
And so the each successive book, I've actually the first book was I found a publisher for. The second book I actually did through it's called Book Baby, which they sort of handle a lot of the stuff for you, but it's
Mm-hmm.
it's more or less self-published. After that, I felt like, no, I know what I'm doing. So for the third book, I did it all of that myself. I still had people go over it, editors and
Right.
people like
Right.
that. I hired a cover designer, but I was able to do all that stuff myself, and it was even more fun. So the one I'm working on now, I'm doing that again. I already had the cover designer. See, I used the same cover designer they used for last time. The one I'm working on now is a workbook. I have not done any
Okay.
workbooks. And it's interesting to do a workbook. Well, given my general orientation to this, which is very much non-formulaic.
Mm-hmm.
The second book I wrote, the title is It's Not About Communication, Why Everything You Know About Couples Therapy is Wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And talk about arrogant titles, The the subtitle there, I mention late in the book, spoiler alert,
Mm-hmm.
that applies to me too. Everything I know about couples therapy is wrong too, which is to say, it's not that I don't have ideas. Of course I do. I think I have some pretty good ideas. So do a lot of other people who may disagree with me.
Mm-hmm.
It's that if I think I know, if I think I have the last word on the subject, that's not going to work. That's not going to help people.
Mm-hmm.
And so here I am with that sort of attitude doing a workbook because there's no way there's going to be a formula that will teach people how to tolerate the anxiety of intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, I do think I'm coming up with a workbook that will guide people with some very structured questions, guide people through understanding the principles of stability and intimacy
Mm-hmm.
and fostering them in their own lives. And it's mostly about fostering intimacy because my it's not an entirely perfect assumption, but generally I'm saying, you know what, if you're reading this book, you're probably pretty good at stability. The problem is probably intimacy. The problem is the tolerating the anxiety of intimacy. And the subtitle of this book, which I haven't fully decided yet, but it's going to be something like When You Love Each Other, no, When You Feel Miles Apart and Still Love Each Other.
Mm.
That's the subtitle. That's the for folks to work on because that's a lot of the people I work with. They will
Yeah.
come in, they're wanting, they do love each other, but they're feeling, sometimes it'll be, well, we love each other, but we're not in love, or I'm not in love with him or her or whatever. Or it'll be, um, we want to be able to love each other. We used to.
Mm-hmm.
We just can't seem to connect anymore. that'll be a lot. And so this is a workbook guiding people through a bunch of sort of just mostly a lot of questions to reflect on
Hmm.
and write down answers to that will lead them, I hope, to developing those skills.
When do you anticipate that it will be published?
Hoping it'll be sometime in the next 4 or 5 months. That may be
Oh, good for
ambitious.
you.
It's over half written, and I know what the rest of it's going to be about, so it's just a matter of
Hmm.
writing it.
Right.
And if I have enough time, I hope to get the writing done in the next month or month and a half, and then I got to have people look at it and go through
Yeah.
that process. But hoping 4 or 5 months. You know,
Okay.
I it,
This is a
yeah.
little bit off the subject, but do you ever have anybody come to you and say, "I love him dearly, I love him to death, but there's times when I want to take a baseball bat to his head."
Oh my God, yes.
Okay.
Of course.
Okay.
I
Okay.
almost want to say, who doesn't say that? That that well, and I mean, depending on how literal you mean by that.
Well, I do
But
have
the
skills, you know.
yeah, but I mean, the idea of mixed feelings, the idea of
Yeah.
someone saying, "Oh my God, I love this person, but they drive me crazy sometimes," and I want to take a baseball bat to their head. One hopes metaphorically, not literally.
Metaphorically. Hmm.
Um, that is a very common phenomenon. And a sort of understanding that often helps soften it too.
Hmm.
It's like, well, of course you get pissed at the person. Sometimes they're really annoying.
Right.
It's that. Again, I don't mean to always trivialize that, but
Right.
that is a real common phenomenon.
Hmm. Yeah, it goes from being moderately annoying to very annoying.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as I say, it can rise to the level where you no longer want to be with it, be with the
Hmm.
person if that's what you have to deal with.
Hmm.
And those are serious threats to a relationship. I do like to differentiate. I have actually a chapter actually I had a chapter in that first book, and I also have a similar one in this one where I expand on it called How to Know When to Call It Quits.
Oh,
And the
wow.
general principle there is, you have a set of problems, whatever. Some of them are deal breakers. And by
Hmm.
deal breakers, I don't just mean that they're super painful. There are some deal breakers that aren't painful until they are.
Hmm.
And there's some really painful things that aren't deal breakers. They're growing pains. The other
Hmm.
category is growing pains.
Hmm.
And I have a bias. I say, look, if you're not sure it's a deal breaker, it's a growing pain.
Hmm.
If you've been living with it, it's probably a growing pain. Now, the things that are classic deal breakers are things where no matter how much goodwill there is, there's no healing from because there's no pathology. It's, for
Hmm.
example, one person wants to have kids and the other absolutely doesn't, and they didn't realize that when they got together, or
Oh,
somebody changed their mind or
yeah.
something. There's nothing wrong with either of those points of view, but they are simply incompatible. And
Hmm.
unless somebody changes their mind, they're either going to be really hurt or really resentful, and that tends to be a deal breaker. Or even something like where they want to live. There are folks who are fine together, except one of them has to live near their family on the East Coast and the other has to live near their family on the West Coast or whatever.
Hmm.
And it's important enough that it's often a deal breaker. Or I know folks where somebody becomes very religious in whatever religion they're part of in ways that the other person can't imagine raising kids in.
Hmm.
And that can become a deal breaker. That's not about somebody growing in a certain way. That's about somebody feeling a certain way that if they're not going to change it, it's not going to work for both parties. But the growing pains thing, that's about growth. If you can possibly learn skills to grow out of it or learn that, maybe not be so hurt by some things that are still there, or maybe those things don't have to be there, those are all growing pains. And the general advice I have about growing pains is if it's growing pains, don't break up too soon. You might still
Hmm.
break up with growing
Hmm.
pains. You might say, yeah, in theory, I could tolerate this, but I just don't want to.
Hmm.
I think, that's a legitimate point of view. I don't like to, yeah, not for me to judge this, but I don't like to sentence people to misery. I
Hmm.
think divorce is a necessary safety valve.
Hmm.
But often people are grateful for at least hanging in there long enough to learn what they need to learn.
Hmm.
Very often, if they do that, they'll discover they don't have to break up. That's like they can appreciate the growth and feel much better.
Hmm.
Even infidelity is a growing pain more than necessarily a deal breaker. People
Hmm.
often say, well, that's a deal breaker, right? Sometimes it is, yes. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes people will say, we can grow past this.
Hmm.
And they're grateful for the growth. So, you never know exactly how that's going to turn out.
Hmm. Wow. Again, generosity of spirit. It would take a lot to be able to say, okay, I forgive you. Let's move on.
Hmm.
Speaking of moving on, I want to talk about something that I found really fascinating is your music career.
Oh, okay. Sure.
Yeah. So have you always been a musician, or is this something that you just found a little bit later in life?
No, I've always been musical. I've done music my whole life. I had a chance when I was in my 20s to go to graduate school in early music. I was in an early music group, played
Hmm.
recorder and various both, early string instruments and things like that. I was in a group like that for over what 25 years, something like that.
Wow.
But early in my 20s, early on,
Hmm.
the we were all offered a chance to go and get a master's degree in early music. And I thought about it and thought about it, and I said, I don't want to do it for a living.
Hmm.
It's the same reason I'm not a rabbi. People
Hmm.
often say, because I used to lead services at a real small synagogue in Montpelier, Vermont. Now I live
Hmm.
in the big city in air quotes of
Hmm.
South Burlington, Vermont. It's like in Burlington, which is next to Burlington, and we say big city. There is no big city in Vermont,
Hmm.
but the Jewish community is somewhat bigger there, and we have rabbis, and that's
Hmm.
there. We have pros. But when I was in Montpelier, I was sort of in quasi in that role. And people say, well, why don't you go to rabbinical school and become a rabbi? Well, I didn't want to do it for a living.
Hmm.
So my music, I do, I'm literal amateur, amateur
Hmm.
coming from the word doing it for love. I do it
Hmm.
because I love it. I don't think I would have had the chops to be a professional musician anyway.
Hmm.
One of my sons is a professional musician. Unfortunately, he was very badly injured in a boulder hit him in the head almost a year ago, and so
Oh
he's
no.
recovering from very serious TBI, which is
Oh,
really painful.
yeah.
But he's a professional musician. He's the
Hmm.
pro in the family. But all of my kids and me and we're all musical
How many
and just
kids do you
love it.
have?
Well, I have three. Judy has two, and actually
Okay.
one of her two is also very musical. And I have three, so between us we have five. My
Hmm.
three are all musical in various ways. In fact, one of them, my middle son was a musical theater major, and then my youngest son was you know, a conservatory trained trombonist.
Hmm. Hmm. Fascinating.
Mhm.
So I could talk to you all day. I love this conversation. What Where can people get a hold of you? How can they connect with you? Where can they buy their books? Where can they get your merch? Love the coffee cup. And if you're having any more merch, on the way, let us know. And just
Oh, sure.
share all of that stuff with the listeners right now, so they know how to find you and where to
Yeah.
find you.
Well, to find me and my books and my
Hmm.
practice and all that stuff, you can go to brucechalmer.com. So if you spell my name right, you'll get it. BRUCECHALMER, brucechalmer.com. That's my website. If you want to get the merch, you go to our podcast website. Now, recall the name of the podcast is Couples Therapy in 7 Words. If you write that all out in words, it'll get you there, couplestherapyin7words.com. But I made a shortcut, CT in 7, the numeral 7, CTIN7.com. I grabbed that one because I thought people aren't going to want to write out couples therapy in 7 words.com, which is
Hmm.
where that one goes, actually.
Hmm.
Or if you just search for couples therapy in 7 words. If you go to our website, that's where the shop is. You can buy our merch, by golly. And it's manufactured as ordered, as it's ordered, so we're not going to sell out, so that's good.
Hmm.
So after we see this, all of a sudden we're going to get a flood of orders, which would
Of
which would
course you
be
will.
quite remarkable because nobody's been buying them, but
Yeah,
it'd be great
well,
if they
yeah.
would. So,
Yeah, I
yeah.
know. The life of an author and a podcaster and all that kind of stuff. Everybody thinks it's just so romantic and
Oh,
so
yeah.
so lucrative. I will never forget the first time actually it was my PCP and he's like, "Oh, you have a podcast? Oh my gosh, that's so lucrative. You make so much money." And I'm looking at him like, "I'm not Joe Rogan. I'm just happy to get through." So,
Ah,
anyway,
yes.
uh-huh.
We will
Do
talk
you
about,
Go
we
ahead.
have tens and tens of listeners, that's
And
it's actually more than that, but still. Yeah.
growing every month, right?
Yes, indeed. Yep.
Okay. Well, do
It's
you
actually
have,
hundreds, but still. Yeah.
yeah, but still, I know it's not like
Yeah.
it's really funny. I think they say that the statistics, well, you're a statistic guy, would know this better than I do, that like out of every new podcaster, they usually quit by the seventh one, seventh or 10.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure you are even more than we are. And we're like, in the top whatever percent. It's the top
Right.
10%, the top
Yeah.
5%, whatever, just for having that many episodes and lasting as long as we lasted. Yeah,
Right. Yeah. There's a lot to be said for incomparable stubbornness and never giving up and never giving in.
absolutely.
So before we sign off, do you have any final pearls of wisdom to share with the listeners that they can kind of like think about?
When often folks who are interviewing me will ask that sort of as a sign
Hmm.
off question, and I just fall back on the 7 words. It's that's my my little nugget of wisdom that I crafted all those years ago. Be kind, don't panic, and have faith.
And it is brilliant. I love it. Thank you so much for being on the show. This has been a fantastic conversation. I have loved every bit of it. And it's
Well,
wonderful to
thank
meet
you.
you.
Thank you so much.
Everybody, thank you so much for listening. Please do share this episode with everybody you know. We can all use a little bit of help every now and again. And some of these little pearls of wisdom, think I might even write it and put it on my refrigerator because, especially since we're going through this little kind of stressful time of moving out of state. So, and just
Mm.
remember be kind to yourself, be kind to others. And that is the way of the FemiNinja.